have some concerns and some requests on item 3.5 that I'd like to vocalize, if I could. So I don't mind discussing this emergency thing, and I don't mind putting it on the calendar, on the agenda to discuss. But as I understand do I understand correctly at this point? I don't know if our chief can answer some of these questions for me if he's here.
Sure, Chief.
I did notice that he was here. Do I understand that the police union is also supporting this emergency declaration to allow city manager and the police chief to change the normal employee staffing assignments? Are the police unions supporting this effort?
They are supportive, Councilmember.
Okay. So will they be signing like a side letter agreement of, when they do, is it necessary for them to sign a side letter agreement?
No. There isn't a side letter, and it's not necessary. This is affords the council the ability to declare an emergency, and therefore we can impose. So this is really the exception to the meet and confer process, and they seem to be on board, as I hear the chief, with the idea that there's an emergency and they don't have enough time to sit down and negotiate. So that's why we're doing it this way.
Yeah, I'm thankful that the POA is also supporting this. I am concerned about the message this sends to the public that the word emergency may unnecessarily alarm our citizens. So that's one of my biggest concerns, and I know that burglary rates are going up, and my concern is that we may not be doing enough to work on some of these items that we have been working on for years to put them across the finish line before we declare an emergency. For example, in the past, when I first came on board, we were looking at bidding out the staffing for security staffing at the airport. And if I vote on this, I'm going to support this being on the memo as long as we include some of these other topics to be discussed simultaneously. That the airport staffing to be outsourced. One thing that I think could immediately also be done is not allowing our police officers to do paid jobs, and these are the at least temporarily suspend paid jobs, because I think that'll actually help us give our our strained police force some of the relief that they're obviously under. Because if we're declaring an emergency, we need to look at all avenues, and I want to be clear. We just need to be looking at every single avenue of ways to provide relief for our police force and make sure that we have the security for our constituents and the citizens of the city. So I want us to look at immediately also implementing a suspension of paid jobs that basically that they're the outsourcing. I also want to see if we can, since the unions are accepting, and there has been a letter in their there are some very simple things that the unions can actually help us with, which is actually sign the letter, the MOA letter, allowing us to do the PSRP, which is sometimes known as a drop program, to allow retirees the opportunity to stay on the job and work. And I would like some progress by the 30th, and also. It's a simple letter allowing, and we've had something approved, I think, through city councils through 2013 to allow bonuses for anybody referring a police officer to come back. I think that's at a minimum what we should pass simultaneously. I think these things can actually, some of these things may take a longer time, but at least the paid jobs program and the bonuses could be just a signature away, and I'm hoping that we can actually do that in conjunction with this emergency declaration.
Allow me to jump in at this point. I'll allow folks to respond to specific concerns, specific programs. But right now, I think Rick's going to tell us we have a very limited authority under state law to agendize this item. And I think it's important we convey, this is not, this particular waiver, this requirement under the Myers-Millis-Brown Act, and we do nothing else. It's not an or, it's a question of and. Many of these other issues that we have been discussing and we will be discussing, we continue to move forward with. And in fact, on item D, you'll see we're talking about study session schedules. I think several days ago, city manager and I met to determine that we will add a date specifically focused on police staffing and all of the various elements of what we can do to improve police staffing and our readiness. And that date, I believe we're selecting a date in September. Is that right, Dave?
That's correct. I think we're looking at September 19th.
Okay. So that's an opportunity for us to fully and publicly discuss every one of these elements as all of the items continue to be worked on by staff. But it is clear that while many of us are quite open to the idea, for example, of seeing whether or not airport could be staffed in other ways, that's not a solution that's going to get us any relief in the next 2 or 3 weeks. That is, even if everyone were to be on board with that and everyone thought that was a good idea, it would take several months for another agency to understand what the implications would be, understand how to staff an airport, which is very, very complex. No other agency has done it outside of the San Jose Police Department and the TSA. So it's not something that addresses the immediate concern that this chief is faced with. And so I think it's important, both because we're legally constrained about what we can consider, and I'll ask Rick to speak on that in a moment, but also because we have an immediate issue to address, and we can deal with some of these other items as we're able to, that we know are not going to give us the relief we need by the time of the September shift change. Rick, did you?
I'll just note the item is a declaration of emergency as noted under the Myers-Millis-Brown Act. The need for the emergency is the immediate, and I want to stress the word immediate, threat to public security, public safety. And it really is, and the remedy, which requires the department to act without going through a meet and confer, is to get more people on patrol. So redeploying people that are in other assignments on patrol, and that's the need for the immediacy. To the mayor's point about the study session on September 19th, that is something that anything and everything can be discussed. And I would also note that closed session next Tuesday and any Tuesday after that, you meet with your labor negotiators, and these are items that are on the list for meet and confer. There's a whole host you can add to the list and have that full conversation in directing your negotiators to move forward with whatever items council wants to. So it's not that these topics aren't going to be covered. It's the proper place, and this really just addresses that immediate need for under Myers-Millis-Brown because of the public safety emergency.
Chief, did you want to add anything?
Not this time.
Okay. Is Councilman Khamis?
Yeah, well, thank you, Rick. Why wouldn't we be able to do something as quickly as temporarily suspending paid jobs? Because that wouldn't require a whole heck of a lot, and I don't understand. If we're going to go ahead and declare an emergency, it relieves us of some of these negotiation constraints.
Councilmember, that is something that we have considered. However, most of our officers, we are struggling as it is right now to fill non-city paid jobs as it is. That is an option that we have looked at. But the only issue and the only options we're looking at if we can't go to this plan would be really to cancel and put a limit on all the other time and a half pay cards that we have, meaning we'd have to consider stopping our burglary cars, our gang suppression cars, our quality of life cars, in order for those individuals that would normally work those cars to work a beat. And that is something, quite frankly, that I'm trying to avoid. By bolstering our patrol force, we still might be able to do those side jobs. And if we didn't have that, we would not be able to do those jobs in order for those officers that would normally work those 3, 4, 5-hour jobs that they do to work their 10-hour beat assignments.
How many hours does the staff actually work side jobs? Are you keeping track of how many hours our police officers are working non-city jobs, these paid jobs that they call them, they're not city.
No, I'm sure there is a way to keep track and we can get those numbers. However, that's, we're finding it difficult to even staff those at times because officers are working time and a half paid jobs for the city. So, I mean, that's, it's something we've considered, but ultimately, really, the issue would be to stop the other time and a half paid cars in order to fill our beats.
Councilmember Khamis, allow me to, if I can, because I think there's an important issue that just needs to be teased out here on that very specific matter, which is, even if we stopped all paid jobs outside the city, Chief, it still wouldn't affect your ability to actually get those officers out on patrol.
No, absolutely not.
You'd still need this in order to move those officers out to patrol.
Absolutely.
Okay. So the fact that you can stop folks working in other assignments doesn't change the limitation that the chief currently has in moving officers to patrol, and he's looking to have us lift that limitation. I think that's what this is about.
Well, again, my concern is for the officers. If they're working these side jobs and then they're coming back and working 12-hour shifts and 14-hour shifts, their ability to do their jobs may suffer. That's one of my primary concerns. And I think that we can actually quickly look into allowing other jurisdictions to take over some of these side jobs, or even allow, what do we call those officers that are the ones that have training and are the
Community
Reserves?
service officers.
not community service, reserves. The reserves to potentially take over more of these paid jobs so that more of our force can actually, these things are going to be discussed next Tuesday. I mean, let's face it, I'm not going to, this is a prelude, I would think, to those discussions, and I'm hoping that we can have some solid steps forward. Everybody, and I know we can go to do a study session, but quite frankly, we've been studying it for 3.5 years since I've been here, and some of these things have not moved across the finish line. We could at least get the POA to sign the bonus for incoming police officers that'll give $7,000 that we already approved back in 2013. There are some things that I think we should immediately implement along with this. And I'm not against this emergency, but I want it to be, if we're going to take this emergency as a serious emergency, we need to do all we can, and we need to make sure that we can get these things that we think are going to get across the finish line as soon as possible. We can't just tell our community that, hey, we're going to declare an emergency and we're going to get more patrols without actually taking a look at some of these things that can help the police ranks now, and could have helped from long ago, in my opinion. Some of these things could have taken across the finish line. So my motion is to accept the emergency ordinance to be added to the agenda, accept the agenda as a whole, but to add a discussion on at least bonuses for new hires, and looking at what we could do to limit paid jobs so that more of our police officers could get the rest that they need, and ask other agencies to take over some of these ideas.
May I suggest that that's more proper in closed session to instruct your labor negotiators, because there's a whole host of items, and those are items that would be added or as needed. And I think everybody gets the idea, the message that this is imminent, and a lot more needs to be done, and the conversations are going to continue. But these are really more proper to be instructing Jennifer and her team than in an open session.
Well, with all due respect, we've been instructing that behind closed doors for quite some time, and I'm glad we're actually discussing it in open doors, and I'm happy that we're moving forward. We need to make sure that our police department has the resources that they have, and I don't mind discussing bonuses, whatever happens to be, as long as we get to keep our police officers healthy and safe on the streets, and our community is safe as well. And I don't think that we should limit the discussion behind closed doors. I don't think that's worked in the past, and I'm hoping that we can actually take action on at least two of these things that I'm very adamant about. because I think they will actually potentially lead us in the right direction.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Okay, the motion fails. Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I'd like to move staff's recommendation.
Second.
And move that for full discussion. I just want to say.
I think the
appreciate-
motion is the full ad sheet.
The
Yeah,
full,
the full
oh, the
ad
full,
sheet.
I'm
Yeah, yeah.
sorry, the full ad sheet and approving the agenda
Yeah.
With sunshine waivers,
and including, I'm sorry,
with sunshine waivers.
with the sunshine waivers, et cetera. And I just want to say, I'm very sympathetic to Johnny's passionate appeal for us to look at a lot of different things. And certainly this is an emergency situation. And so I'm really focused on the chief coming to us and in a situation where he needs us to take immediate action. It's a very confined kind of decision that we're making here, and it's allowing him to go out and rebid those jobs. And it's a big thing that he's going to go do with the force. And we need to be standing together here and knowing that what he's doing is going to make it safer for his officers, and really important for everyone listening, it's going to make it safer for the community. So those burglary cars that the chief might have to get rid of, those burglary cars have helped reduce burglaries in Evergreen from 99 down to under 30 over the last several months and years. So these kinds of changes, that if he had to go to some other more dramatic measure because we didn't want to support this right now, could really have a negative impact on public safety in the city. So I think it's very important. The chief, we have, we interviewed him, we selected him. He's got the background to understand this. He's got the union support. It is a tough pill to swallow, I think, for a lot of the rank and file, but he's asking to do this. He doesn't want to do this. He's asking to do this because he knows it's going to make our city safer. It's the right thing to do, and these are the tough decisions we have to make up here. And it's our responsibility to support the chief right now and move this forward. It can be debated at council, but this is an emergent action, and let no one misunderstand this in the public. We need to do this today. And yes, there's a long list of other things that need to be done, mid-range, long-range. Many of those, most of those get discussed in negotiation, and we know that negotiating with our bargaining units in the proper format is the right way to go. That's how we're going to get some progress, and not debating everything up here right now. So I really strongly support our chief and what he's trying to do to keep our city safe.
So a question for the chief. We currently do have a limit on the amount of hours that an officer can work in paid jobs outside. Is that correct?
Yes, Mayor.
Okay, and do you recall what that limit is?
I believe it's 24 in a pay period.
That's a 2-week period roughly?
Yeah, I believe it is, Mayor.
Okay,
But we
24
do.
hours.
Yeah, but we do have limits, really what they can work a week.
Right.
So there are limits to what they can do in paid jobs, and it's not just paid jobs. It's paid jobs plus overtime combined.
Okay. And then, okay, so that's paid jobs and overtime all at once. I got it. And then, Rick, just for clarity, if we wanted to include all these other items in item 3.5, are we constrained by state law in doing so?
Well, you're constrained into what action you can take. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the emergency. In terms of can the council have a discussion on any
Right.
items, well, that's really the purpose of your study session, I
And
think.
that needs to be properly agendized. You
Yeah,
can't rush
that's-
that by emergency to.
Right, it's not part of the emergency. It would have to be a separate item. I think, yeah,
So, I mean, I've been on the record about supporting a PSRP program. I've been on the record about looking to all kinds of alternatives to improve our staffing, including the bonus that Councilmember Khamis referred to. I've been on the record about looking at alternative staffing at the airport. I've been on the record on all those things, but not a single one of those items will get an officer out on patrol in September in a neighborhood where we currently would not have an officer under the current shift bid. And so we need to do things that are actually going to affect that issue, which is the urgent issue that faces the chief today. These are other issues that can be properly agendized. In fact, we're about to properly agendize, I believe, in a couple items from now, if we have the support of the rest of the committee. And I certainly support a very public conversation about all of those issues. But under state law, my understanding is we're restricted to the urgency issue that actually affects the chief's ability to staff in September. Chief?
Mayor, real quick, just to correct myself, it's 30 hours a pay period
Thank you.
and 16 hours a day of discretionary overtime. So basically,
Okay.
that's overtime that they choose to work. So it's 30 hours a pay period.
Okay, so overtime would include under the pay for San Jose PD or offsite.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks for the clarification. Okay, Vice Mayor?
And I want to go on record, too, saying I support all the programs that Councilmember Khamis has named as well. I just simply think we need to focus on the emergent issue we have in front of us. But I also think that when we come back to the study session, we should get a better understanding of the pay jobs, and if that is something that we would want to see more action taken on. I know that, I mean, we heard the Bacon Festival is postponed now because of lack of, obviously priorities are getting, the priorities are, are being adhered to. So there's lots of things that are not going to happen because we simply don't have the staffing to do it, and we're already seeing that. So, but we can certainly take a look at that. And I appreciate my colleagues' interest in making sure that we have both short-term, mid-range, and long-term programs that are going to help us achieve more public safety.
Thank you. Well, and I want to thank Councilmember Johnny Khamis for bringing up, I think, some important issues that I think are important to all of the council members, most definitely. And I look forward to the study session in terms of what we will be doing in the future regarding the staffing of our police department. I know that for a city this size, it's going to be important to look at all the alternative possibilities. But I also want to thank our chief of police for taking such bold steps. I have the utmost confidence in the decisions that you make and the fact that you came to us and you're asking us for help and that you were able to elicit the support of the POA in taking these steps. So that gives me the confidence to be able to support you by casting my support today and in fact yesterday. So I wanted to go on the record and be able to say that because I know that this is not an easy decision, and I know that it takes a great deal of thought and a great deal of deep thinking in your process of making this decision. But I want to be able to thank you publicly by stating that.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Right. Councilmember Alvarado.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say I come and support my distinguished colleague from Almaden. I think he brings up very relevant points and pertinent points. The concept of emergency, I think, is telling the public something that doesn't really exist. When you say emergency, the public's thinking, great, you're going to do everything you can do to turn the ship around, to do all the things, but it's actually not. It's a very narrow thing that we're looking at, and the staffing issue has been around a long time. We've had shift bids that have been short for a long time. This isn't a new problem. It's just and something that's decided to come up all of a sudden. The real emergency is the fact that the meet and confer process, union negotiations, that's what's broken. We have, the council and many of us have taken stands and say, I support X, Y, and Z. We believe those are things that'll help. And we've had those on the agenda for years, and we have not been able to proceed. So really the emergency is that union negotiations, due to the fact that they're private meetings, the public has no idea what's going on, that's what's broken, and that's why we have an emergency. The some of the items that Councilmember Khamis has talked about, we as a council voted on them years ago, yet they have not moved at all. So that's the real emergency. The voters passed Measure V in 2010, enabling the fire and police chief to have power in their staffing and administrative functions. That's really what needs to happen, is utilizing Measure V to do what's right. We cannot be stuck for years discussing these items and getting nowhere. That is the real issue. That's the real emergency, that we can't get progress on the things we want to do. And everyone will point out, well, you know what? Even if you do that, it'll take time to happen. It won't do it overnight. I know. That's why we brought it up years ago, because had we acted on it, had we had agreement, we would have been there by now. And that's the real problem. And I understand there's this topic of scheduling a study session. We've had study sessions for years on this topic, yet nothing seems to get passed. And now, because the meet and confer, the union negotiation process is broken, because it takes so long to get anything done, we're passing this concept of an emergency, which is being interpreted by so many people in so many different ways. Again, the public thinks that if you're going to pass an emergency, then you're actually going to do something about it. take all those ideas that people have had that are good ideas that are used in other cities in California and implement them. But reality, it's not going to do that. So this is just I disagree with the wording of emergency. I think in this context, because it gives the public a false sense of hope that we can actually do something when we're restricted by the union negotiation process to get anything done. Common sense ideas that the public would agree with. So I just want to appreciate my colleague from Almaden Valley for speaking up on the item. And I know some of my colleagues on the council have strong viewpoints on some of those items, but as a whole, as a council, as a city, we've been unable to get any of this done, and I think that's what's disappointing in this entire conversation.
I just want to point out one bit of agreement I have with Councilmember Oliverio. I also agree that emergency is terrible verbiage. I wish it didn't exist under the state law, under Myers-Millis-Brown Act. That is the word we have to use, because unlike what was said earlier, the property crime rate is actually dropping in this city. It's not increasing. It is not an emergency with chaos on the streets. This is not the after effects of a hurricane or a riot. This is a situation in which we have a severe staffing shortfall that we know subjects our public and our officers to risks that they should not be subjected to. And we can do something about it immediately. But I should ask Rick, Councilmember Oliverio mentioned Measure V. Does Measure V overrule state laws like Myers-Millis-Brown Act and their requirements?
No, it doesn't. And you still need to the extent an item is a meet and confer item, which this is, you need to comply. And so, again, to your point, this is an emergency for under Myers-Millis-Brown only. It's not a charter emergency. It is not a disaster. It's to deal with the ability to impose on an immediate basis.
So this is the magic word we are required to utter under state law. I understand that, and that's why we are considering this approach. I also do not like the use of the word emergency. I would say that, this issue about what we can do and can't do, despite Councilmember Oliverio's protestations, the Myers-Millis-Brown Act requires us to meet and confer, and in many cases reach agreement. And because we do not have agreement, we cannot move forward with some of these things. So we're going to push to be able to move forward. Other questions or comments?
Point of order, Mayor, for the city attorney.
Yeah.
So, city attorney, the Measure V process is a much faster process than prior to Measure V if it was used. I mean, if you want to lay out the process for bringing up an idea and collectively bargaining, meeting, conferring, impasse, et cetera,
Yeah.
and then you overlay what Measure V does, that's a shorter process.
Right, but Measure V allows the chief and reaffirms the right of the chief to impose or direct or
Staffing
essentially
decisions.
staff his department as he sees fit. But to the extent it involves a meet and confer issue, you still have to comply with state law and meet those meet and confer requirements. Therefore, we're falling under the statute. This is an exception to that. By declaring an emergency, you're allowed to move on a staffing decision right away.
Right. So what I hope that will be able to happen then, maybe at the study session, since we're going to talk about the myriad of 24 other items that have been discussed over the years to implement, is that we, decide that if this is really important, that Measure V should be used to get these items over the goal line. Because waiting 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years that are good ideas that come from the council but are stalled, then maybe using Measure V can get those items over the goal line in the short term, or in a shorter time period, I believe.
To the extent you want us to address how Measure V relates and works with Myers-Millis-Brown and the relative powers of the department or the chief to act, we can do that at the study session.
And I think that'd be great because it has yet to be used, even though the voters passed it in 2010. Thank you.
Okay, we are on to a motion. There are no cards from members of the public. Councilmember Khamis?
Yeah, I also want to be on the record. I don't want to lead people the wrong way. I do want to support the chief in his effort to manage the police force. The only reason I'm stating this is because we need to do more than this if we're going to declare an emergency. I will support this, but like it or not, we are going to be discussing alternatives regardless on Tuesday. I may be bringing them up again in our discussion, and I'm hoping staff can move some of these things forward. I'd love, since us and the POA seem to be on the same track at this point, I'm hoping that we can take some of these easy things. Bonuses shouldn't be difficult. Any movement in the right direction would be very welcomed on my behalf on some of these other things that I hope will bolster our police department. So while I am going to support this motion, whether we put these things officially on the agenda or not, they will come up next Tuesday, and I'm hoping that we can have some answers.